June 5th, 2005, 8,300 meters. Polish climber Marcin Miotk is making his way back to his tent at Camp 3 on Everest, having just become the first Pole ever to reach this mountain without oxygen. He's been on his feet since 5 in the morning, no bottle, no backpack, no strength left. He unzips the tent to sleep, to eat, to drink, and for the first second, he doesn't understand what he's looking at. Someone climbed up into the death zone and carefully carried away everything in his tent. Sleeping bag, stove, medicine, spare clothing. Everything a person usually can't survive a night at 8,300 without. The zipper isn't even torn. This is the story of how a climber had his life stolen at 8,300, and of what he did to get it back. There are stories that begin in the mountains. This one begins in their complete absence. Marcin Miotk was born on March 23, 1973, in Wejherowo, a small seaside town on the coast of Kashubia. The nearest real summits, the Tatras, are 600 kilometers away. Between his home and any mountain lie the plains, the Baltic, and the Vistula. Not a single serious cliff within a day's walk. His father Jan, his mother Brigida, a Kashubian family from a quiet town where life flows between the church, the school, and the shoreline. Miotk grows up in that rhythm, finishes school, and enrolls in a finance and management program. His education is preparing him for an office job in Warsaw, for numbers and calculations, not for thin air and crampons on his boots. He comes to mountaineering late, for this profession, catastrophically late, 22 years old. His peers who grew up in Krakow, Zakopane, or Katowice have by that age already spent years climbing the Tatra walls, have already been to the Alps, and have set their sights on the Pamirs. Miotk himself would later put it without any drama. I started climbing late because I was already 22 years old. His first club is Klub Wysokogórski Troich Miasto, the regional association of Gdansk, Gdynia, and Sopot. This is not the heart of Polish Himalayan climbing. It's the edge, the provincial corner of the country's mountaineering map. But it's here that he first straps on crampons and picks up an ice axe. The expeditions follow an escalating geography. In '95, the Chersky Range in Siberia, about the coldest training ground a beginner could possibly choose. In '97, Mont Blanc and the Marmolada in the Dolomites. In '98, the Caucasus, Elbrus, and Jantugan. And in '99 comes the first thing that truly becomes a signature under his name, Aconcagua in the Andes, the highest summit in both Americas, 6,959 meters. Miotk does it as a solo traverse, in through Plaza Argentina, out through Plaza de Mulos, crossing the entire massif from one side to the other, one man, under his own power, with no support. In that traverse you can already see everything that's coming, but Aconcagua is 7,000. The real death zone is still another 1,000 meters up, and the price you pay for it is something else entirely. In the spring of that same '99, the Troich Miasto Club puts together an expedition to Shishapangma in Tibet. Miotk goes with the team, Tarasiewicz, Kawiak, Wieczkowski, Schulz, Henschke. They climb the north side. It's a long, windy, technically simple but physically draining route, a classic among the Tibetan 8,000ers. On the floor of every tent in base camp lies many months of preparation and training. The goal is the mountain's central summit, 8,013 meters. On April 21st and 22nd, 1999, the team climbs for the top. They carry no oxygen bottles. It's a deliberate decision by the club to climb the mountain the way real mountaineers climb it, not the way clients do. For 26-year-old Miotk, this is his first encounter with the zone above 8,000 meters. Thin air, where every step drags a pause behind it, cold that works its way through any down jacket, and his own breathing, which starts to sound like someone else's. A caveat is needed here. Modern chroniclers of the 8,000ers do not count Shishapangma's central summit as a full 8,000er. The main summit lies a little farther along the ridge, and reaching it is far harder. Many climbers stop at the central, tick the box, and descend. Today that is considered a compromise. But back in '99, that argument isn't yet so loud. Miotk himself counts Shishapangma among his 8,000ers. And more important than a formal line in a table, it's here that the inner rule is born, that will define the rest of his life in the mountains. Without oxygen. Always. It isn't a slogan, and it isn't a pose for the camera. It's a form of respect for the mountain. The mountain lets you up, or it doesn't. But it plays fair with you only when there's no go-between, no bottle, standing between your lungs and its air. 20 years later, Miotk will still be holding to this rule, and paying for it. But that comes later. 4 years pass between Shishapangma and the next 8,000er. Miotk works in Warsaw, saves for expeditions, climbs in the Tatras, slowly building up his technique and his connections within the Polish mountaineering community. In the autumn of 2003, he travels to Tibet, to Cho-Oyu, 8,201 meters, the Northwest Ridge. Here, the no-oxygen rule faces a new test. This time, there's no team with him. Only one rope partner, Kinga Baranowska, an emerging Polish high-altitude climber for whom Cho-Oyu is her first 8,000er. 2 people on the mountain, no high-altitude Sherpas, no large intermediate camps. Whatever they carry up, they carry on their own shoulders. The tactics they choose are also unusual for the time. Most teams on Cho-Oyu set up 4 camps, base, advanced, and 3 high camps, and launch the summit push from the 3rd, at 8,100 meters. Miotk and Baranowska do it differently. They compress the scheme into a fast dash from the 2nd camp, from 7,000 meters. That means more vertical on summit day, less acclimatization in reserve, less room for error, and no bottled oxygen. On October 5th, 2003, they both stand on the summit of Cho-Oyu. The rope team works cleanly. The expedition turns out short, precise, and free of drama. The descent goes by the book, with no frostbite and no lost gear. For Baranowska, this summit becomes a starting point. She'll go on to climb several more 8,000ers, become a well-known Polish high-altitude climber, and one of the most recognizable women's faces in the country's Himalayan climbing. Cho-Oyu, for her, is a launch pad. For Miotk, this summit means something else. His second 8,000er, and for the first time he's working at that altitude not as part of a club expedition, but with a small crew, essentially as a pair. He realizes something important. His style is carried not only by long siege tactics, but also by fast, light formats. No bottles, no support, no big infrastructure. Back in Poland, the 30-year-old high-altitude climber from Wejherowo starts appearing regularly in the Mountaineering Chronicle. Before, he was known in Gdansk and within the club, now in Warsaw and Krakow too. And here he makes an unexpected move. After Cho-Oyu, the logical next step would be another 8,000er, Manaslu, the Gasherbrooms, Broad Peak, the familiar trajectory. But in the summer of 2004, Miotk doesn't head for the Himalayas. He goes to the Tian Shan, to Peak Pobeda, 7,439 meters. In altitude, that's 1,000 meters lower than the 8,000ers. In reputation, it's a different level. Pobeda is known among climbers as the harshest 7,000er in Central Asia. A long ridge at nearly 7,000 meters, constant wind, avalanche-prone slopes, a deceptively easy start, and a murderously hard middle. A mountain on which entire expeditions have turned back, or worse. Miotk's partner is Jacek Teller. They don't take the simplest line, they take the Mezmarishvili route across western Pobeda, a long ridge rib where you have to do technical work right at altitude, protecting yourself on rock and ice at the same time. And, crucially, they go in alpine style. That means no intermediate camps with fixed ropes strung in advance, no support groups, no Sherpas, and no porters. A team of 2 climbs with what they carry on their shoulders, pitching camps as they go and packing them up behind them. On August 15, 2004, Miotk and Teller stand on the summit of Pobeda. By the Polish records, this is only the 3rd Polish ascent of this mountain, and the first in pure alpine style. In Poland, this news doesn't go unnoticed. The Warsaw Mountaineering Club awards the rope team the prize Orzeł KW Warskawa, the Club Eagle, for the best mountaineering achievement of the year. It's not a national award, but within the narrow professional circle, it means more than many television prizes. By the end of 2004, Miotk's portrait in Polish mountaineering looks like this: 8,013 on Shishapangma, 8,201 on Cho-Oyu, 7,439 on Pobeda in alpine style, all without oxygen, all with a conscious choice of technique. At 31, he already has both altitude and difficulty. At this point, his mountain biography could comfortably have gone on the same way for the next 20 years. But within 6 months, everything turns over. Spring 2005, March and April, the classic season for Himalayan ascents. Miotk is already in Nepal. He's part of the team of one of the strongest Polish high-altitude climbers of the time, Piotr Pustelnik. Working alongside him is another well-known name, Piotr Morawski, who a few years later will die on Dhaulagiri. The objective is Annapurna 1, 8,091 meters, already, by itself, one of the deadliest mountains on the planet by the ratio of ascents to climbers who never came back. But the team chooses not the normal route, the south face, the Bonington route. The Brit and Chris Bonington put it up in 1970, and at the time, it was a breakthrough. The first time an entire Himalayan wall had been climbed in technical style. Ever since, Annapurna's south face has remained one of the hardest walls in the Himalayas. The constant threat of avalanches, rockfall, hanging seracs that break off without warning. Anyone who goes onto it understands that the chance of coming back is lower than on the ordinary commercial routes. Pustelnik's team works on the wall for several weeks. They fix ropes, haul gear up to the high camps, push above 7,000 meters. It's long, exhausting work. At great altitude, nights in cramped tents under masses of ice hanging overhead. Miotk climbs to roughly 7,300, 7,400. That's well beyond the comfort zone, but the summit party doesn't go higher. The conditions don't come together. Something, the weather, the state of the wall, the climbers' bodies, breaks the attempt every time. The expedition folds without the summit. For Miotk, it's a second turnaround in a row after failures on other routes. By the standards of Himalayan climbing, this is nothing remarkable. Such turnarounds are the norm of the genre. But for a man who had reached the top 3 times in a row before this, 2 failures back-to-back is a different kind of momentum. And here he makes the decision that will define all of his later fame. As part of that same trip, Miotk has one more permit, not for an 8,000er in Nepal, for another mountain on the other side of the border, in Tibet, for Everest. But not the Everest his 13 countrymen had already climbed. Every one of them had gone up the southern Nepalese side. Miotk chooses the northern Tibetan one. Logistically, that means traveling straight from Kathmandu into China, through Lhasa to the foot of the mountain, to base camp at an altitude of 5,200. The project he's climbing under is called the Old Spice Mount Everest Expedition. That's how the Polish press presents it. The main sponsor, a maker of men's fragrances, lends the expedition its name. But behind the commercial headline is anything but a commercial structure. On paper, Miotk is going under a general umbrella that looks like a group expedition. On the mountain, he's alone. No rope partner, no high-altitude Sherpas to carry oxygen bottles, ropes, and tents above base. The route is the classic northern one. From base, a long approach along the moraine to advanced base camp at 6,400. Then a steep ice rise to the North Col, where the first high camp stands, around 7,000. Then the North Ridge, a long, windy rib with 2 intermediate camps. The second high camp at 7,800, the third at 8,300. From there, the summit pushed through the 3 famous steps, rock bands right on the ridge, and out onto the summit. The style is solo, without supplementary oxygen, and here you need to grasp the scale of what Miotk is taking on. By the spring of 2005, 13 Poles had been on Everest, including Wanda Rutkiewicz, Wojciech Kurtyka, Krzysztof Wielicki, all of them with oxygen. Before Miotk, not a single Pole had climbed Everest without a bottle. He would be the first. That same season, an Austrian team is working on a neighboring route. They're moving a little ahead of schedule and reach higher than Miotk sooner. During one of their rotations, descending to rest, the Austrians leave a sleeping bag for him at the third high camp. At 8,300, ordinary mountain solidarity, the kind people have practiced on the big peaks for years. Help someone, and you'll be helped. That sleeping bag will become an important detail a few weeks later. For now, it's May. On the 29th, Miotk sets out on his first attempt. From advanced base camp, he climbs to the North Col, hauls gear into the tent at the first high camp. Then, a move to the tent at the second high camp, at 7,800. Here too, he drags up everything he'll need for the summit push: sleeping bag, warm clothing, gloves, headlamp, stove. In those days, the wind is raging on the ridge itself. Visibility drops to a few meters. The temperature at summit altitude falls below -40. To push for the top without oxygen in those conditions is certain suicide. No experienced climber would take that risk. Miotk turns around and descends back to advanced base camp, then to the main one at 5,200. Here, he'll wait for the next weather window. In early June, a chance appears. Miotk heads up again. He climbs to the North Col. He comes up to his tent at the first high camp, and the first thing he sees is that the zipper has been opened by someone else's hand. His Gore-Tex clothing, the outer layer of storm protection, has vanished from the tent. It's not critical. He can manage without it as far as the second camp. He grits his teeth and goes on. When he reaches the second high camp, at 7,800, the picture gets worse. Almost everything he hauled up there weeks earlier is gone. Sleeping bag, gloves, storm trousers, storm jacket, socks, headlamp. Everything needed for a night and for a summit push from the third camp has vanished. Without a sleeping bag at 7,800, a person won't make it to morning. Miotk goes from tent to tent, opening other people's zippers, and finds a free sleeping bag in one of them. He borrows it for one night and survives it in someone else's warmth. In the morning, he carefully folds the sleeping bag, puts it back, and continues up. Of everything that was stolen, only one loss turns out to be irreversible: the headlamp. The standard summit schedule on Everest from the north side looks like this. From the third camp, at 8,300, climbers set out between midnight and 1 in the morning, in the dark by headlamp, so they can reach the summit around noon and get back to the tent before sunset. Miotk has no headlamp. You don't set out in the dark without one, a simple rule of the mountain. Miotk leaves the third camp not at midnight, like every other team on the ridge, but only around 5 in the morning when it's already light. By then, the other climbers are 5 hours ahead of him and already working between the first and second steps, 1,000 meters higher up the ridge. And he takes a risk he wouldn't take under normal conditions. He pushes for the summit with no backpack, no spare water, no first aid kit, no thermos, none of what people usually drag with them to the top of Everest. The logic is simple: shed weight to gain speed. Every extra kilogram at 8,000 meters costs you tens of minutes. The 2005 season on Everest is one of the toughest in decades. The first ascent that year came in mid-May, the latest in 45 years. Temperatures on the ridge stay below -40, constant wind. The windows are rare and short. The North Ridge is an endless ribbon of rock and snow you have to move along toward the summit. Along the way, the first step, a small rock obstacle. Then the second, an almost sheer wall with an aluminum ladder the Chinese hung there back in '75. Then the third, the last rock rise before you come out onto the snow dome. Miotk goes through all of it alone, with no oxygen and a mask. With each step, his pulse climbs, his strides shorten. The pauses between them grow longer. By midday, he catches those who started at midnight and overtakes some groups on their descent. He has 9 hours of work on the ridge behind him. At 14:30 local time, he stands alone on the summit of Everest, 8,848 meters. No one around. All the other summiters of that day have already gone down. So, he becomes the first Pole in history to climb the highest mountain on the planet without supplementary oxygen. Before him, 13 of his countrymen had been here, all with a bottle. He is the 14th, and the first without it. And he is also the last summiter of the entire spring campaign on Everest that year. After him, no one else will reach the top for the rest of the season. The descent begins at sunset. Down the same ridge, the same steps, back down. He comes up to the tent at 8,300 between 7 and 7:30 in the evening. The sun no longer reaches the ridge, catching only the peak itself behind his back. The temperature at the camp is dropping almost a degree a minute. Behind Miotk lies an early start at 5 in the morning, 9.5 hours of ascent, 5 hours of descent. Without oxygen, without a backpack, without food. The tent is in its place. That's its great virtue. An orange capsule in the rocky scree, the only shelter at 8,300. Inside, a sleeping bag, a stove, A gas reserve, medicine, spare gloves, a thermos are waiting. Everything you cannot survive a night here without. He unzips it, and for the first second he doesn't understand what he's looking at. The tent is empty. Inside, only a bare mat. No sleeping bag, no stove, no spare clothing, no medicine. None of what he hauled up here over several weeks. This isn't the first theft of his expedition. At the first camp, they took his jacket. At the second, his sleeping bag, his headlamp, and almost all his gear. But there, at 7,800, he still had strength and options left. Here, at 8,300, everything is different. No strength, no options, and no altitude left to retreat to. Someone climbed up to the third camp while he was on his way to the summit. Someone calmly, without hurrying, unzipped his tent and carried out everything of value. Carefully, the tent isn't torn, the zipper isn't broken. Done so that from the outside, nothing would be noticeable. At 8,300 meters without a sleeping bag, a person usually does not come back by morning. It's a medical fact, proven over decades of Himalayan climbing. An exhausted body with no shelter doesn't hold its heat, and at that altitude, it leaves no chances. A few weeks after coming down off the mountain, Miotk would describe this moment in an open letter. The most precise formula would be this one. The robbery at the third camp was the robbery of my life. And right after it, he would add another line that would enter every future retelling of this story. Had I been a little more worn out, I would have gone into the tent, and they would have found my body there the next season. He doesn't stay in the tent. That decision saves his life. And to make it in such a state is a feat in itself. The body wants to lie down. The head demands warmth. The lungs demand rest. Every movement at 8,300 costs you an exhale through gritted teeth. But Miotk crawls back out of the tent and walks through the camp, swaying from exhaustion and from the very altitude at which only a handful work without a bottle. Dusk comes fast on the ridge. The temperature falls. He doesn't have a single intact thing other than what's on his back. In the third camp, besides his empty tent, a few others stand. Most of that day's teams have already gone down, lower, to the warmer second high camp. But in a few tents, Sherpas remain, the ones who work support, carry loads, and don't descend the same day as the clients. Miotk comes up to the first tent and unzips it. People are sitting inside. He asks them for a sleeping bag and a stove for one night, just until morning. Without them, he won't survive. Someone agrees. From somewhere, a sleeping bag and a stove that aren't his are produced. Miotk goes back to his own empty tent and climbs into someone else's warmth. There's a detail to this episode that Miotk would put into words in that same letter. He would turn all of it over in his mind once he was back down, off the mountain, and he would write one sentence. Possibly the very same people who stole my equipment during the day. That is, as he supposes, the ones he asked for a sleeping bag and a stove, saving his own life, might have been the same ones who had carried that equipment off a few hours earlier. By his account, they looked him in the eye, gave him someone else's sleeping bag for one night, and may have known where his own one lay. There's no proof of this. It's his conjecture, voiced after he'd come down. In someone else's gear, Miotk survives the night. It's the longest night of his life. He doesn't sleep. He sits in someone else's bag, keeps a hand on someone else's stove, and counts the hours to dawn. In the morning, he begins the descent. Through the second high camp, through the first, through the North Col, through advanced base camp, down to 5,200. Behind him is the summit. In his head, a tent that had nothing in it. The heart of his story will not be 1430 on June 5th, nor the North Ridge, nor the 45 years of statistics. It will be this night at the third camp, at 8,300. But it won't end in silence. After the descent to the main base camp, after the first hot cups, after the first night in a sleeping bag that no one carried off, Miotk does something not everyone has it in them to do. He doesn't keep quiet, doesn't fob it off with vague words in an interview with a Polish newspaper, doesn't write it all off as the cost of a commercial Everest. He sits down and writes an open letter. The letter is sent to international mountaineering publications, in English going around the Nepalese and Tibetan authorities, around the agencies, around the reputations. He names what happened plainly, not an incident, not a misunderstanding, robbery, and the place, 8,300 meters, during the summit push, Several lines from the letter would later go into every analysis of this story. The first: nothing was left that could in any way be considered of value at 8,300 meters during the summit push. The second: no shame, no ethics, only money matters. And the third, the heaviest: he directly accuses a part of the high-altitude Sherpas, not all of them, a part. By his account, these are the ones who work support on commercial expeditions, and in their free time carry gear out of the tents of solo climbers, whose belongings no one watches over above base camp. They have lost their honor, he writes of the ones he suspects, and he adds a detail that, by his account, hits the hardest. He claims that in the evenings at base camp, once the main work is done, the ones he suspects play cards. And, as Miotk writes, over the cards they discuss which of them carried off the most that week and whose haul was worth more. By his account, this is no longer a rare occurrence, but an established practice among a certain part of the people. This is his assessment, and he stresses that he is not talking about all of them. The letter spreads across the English-language climbing sites, Explorers Web, Everest News. From their reports, the European publications pick it up. In Poland, he makes the news feeds of the largest portals. Explorers Web, a few months later, gives him a special mention of the year. The wording goes, for self-reliance and for the courage to speak openly. And here something happens to Everest that matters more than any statistic. The mountain stops being only a mountain. It becomes a place where, at 8,300, everything a person needs to live can be taken from them, and taken so carefully that the zipper doesn't even tear. In Poland, Miotk's letter reaches the pages of the largest portals and newspapers. W.P. Wiadomości writes about the first Pole without oxygen, Gdańsk Nasze Miasto and Wejherowo. Nasze Miasto, the local outlets of Kashubia and Pomerania, run interviews with their fellow countrymen. Wejherowo, where he was born and where the family will return with photographs of the summit, finds its way onto the country's national mountaineering map for the first time. Then come the awards. The Kolos Prize for 2005, in the mountaineering category, goes to Miotk. It's the most prestigious Polish award for travel, expeditions, and mountain ascents, given every year to the best of the best. Miotk joins that line. The same year, he reaches the finals of the Jedynka nomination of Polish Radio, Best Hero of the Year in the Sport and Adventure category. But the story's real anchoring in the international literature comes a little later. In 2008, a book by the American journalist Michael Kodas comes out in the United States under the title High Crimes: The Fate of Everest in an Age of Greed. Kodas is a correspondent for the Hartford Courant newspaper, climbed Everest himself, and gathered material for the book across 2 seasons at once. The book devotes an entire chapter to Miotk, the 11th. Kodas reconstructs the events of June 2005 by the day and the hour, quotes directly from the open letter, and adds the testimony of other climbers from that same season. In his telling, Miotk's story stops being an isolated episode and becomes the central example of what the commercial Everest had become in the 2000s. In Poland, the book comes out under the title Zbrodnie na Everestie, Crimes on Everest. Here, Miotk is no longer just a Polish climber who wrote a sharp letter. Here he is one of the key witnesses to an entire era. His name stands alongside the names of those who became victims of the commerce and those who built that commerce. And the main shift takes place. From a solo climber without oxygen, known in narrow circles, Miotk turns into a public figure of an entirely different scale. Now, it's not only climbers who listen to him, but journalists, documentary makers, researchers of the ethics of high-altitude Himalayan climbing. He becomes not the face of victory. He becomes the face of the ethical argument about what a modern big mountain even is. But this isn't all there is to him. Beyond the public role, Miotk goes on doing what he did before Everest. He climbs. And the first place he returns to after the publications and the awards is the Soviet Pamirs. He already has Khan Tengri from 2002, 7,010 meters in the Tian Shan, the first of the 5 7,000ers of the Snow Leopard. That's the old Soviet crown, still respected in the world of mountaineering. In 2006, he takes Peak Korzenievskaya and Peak Somoni, and on August 14, 2007, he climbs Peak Lenin, 7,134 meters, the last of the 5. So, Miotk becomes the second Pole in history to complete the snow leopard, after Marcin Miotk. In 2008, he extends the map through Alaska, Denali by the West Buttress. And the same year, he becomes president of Klub Wysokogórski Warszawa, the capital's club. From a regional climber out of Kashubia, he turns into one of the leading figures of Polish Himalayan mountaineering. And then, the Karakoram and the Himalayas start to push back. In the summer of 2010, he joins a large Polish expedition to K2 by the Sasin route. That season, not a single member reaches the summit. In the spring of 2013, he works on Dhaulagiri. He gets through the Key Rock section, the so-called Eager Band on the northeast ridge, and he turns back at 6,700. The 8,000er shuts him out again. After Dhaulagiri, Miotk disappears from the 8,000er reports for 10 years. The altitude stops, another life appears. He works in Warsaw, runs the Boston Marathon, and the Ironman in Tallinn. He launches a motivational project under the name Everest Motywacji. He gives lectures. In 2018, he publicly criticizes the winter expedition of Tomasz Makiewicz to Nanga Parbat. This is another Polish climber, going for an 8,000er that season, in a style Miotk considers risky. Miotk speaks as a commentator, not as a participant. In 2021, he puts his key public principle into words. There is freedom in the mountains. If you want, go without oxygen. If you want, go with oxygen. Just say so. By the start of the 2020s, Miotk is a voice of Polish sport, Himalayan climbing, a man who is listened to but no longer seen in the mountains. That's how it goes until the spring of 2024. 11 years after Dhaulagiri, 19 years after Everest, Miotk announces a return to the Himalayas. The project is called Bez Tlenu Makalu Expedition, Makalu without oxygen. The name speaks for itself. The mountain is Makalu, 8,485 meters, the fifth highest 8,000er on the planet, known for its harsh wind and the technical character of its final 400 meters. The route is the normal one, the Northwest Ridge. Going with Miotk as his partner is Waldemar Kowalewski, another Polish high-altitude climber. The expedition logistics are handled by 7 Summit Treks, a large Nepalese operator that this spring has several teams working on Makalu at once. This is no longer the lone story it was on Everest. There is a base camp, there are fixed ropes above 6,000, there is an established line of contact with a cook and a doctor, but one point stays unchanged. Miotk has no bottled oxygen. 20 years on, his rule is the same. In May 2024, he sets out on a summit attempt. 20 hours of work on the mountain, 20 hours of ascent from the top camp to the summit, with no bottle. He climbs to the 8,000 mark, 8,100 meters. That's already the death zone, the top of the key rise on the way to the summit. About 400 meters of vertical and several hours of work remain to the top. And he turns back. His condition, his pace, his assessment of his own reserve, one of those parameters doesn't come together. 20 hours without oxygen at 51 is a different physics than the Everest push at 32. In the spring of 2025, he travels to Lhasa, 8,516 meters, the fourth highest 8,000er, climbed by the same route as Everest, through the Khumbu Icefall and the South Col. This time, he goes alone. The expedition has to be cut short, not because of the weather and not because of the state of the ridge, because of a throat infection. In the death zone, at an altitude above 7,000, any infection quickly becomes life-threatening. In the thin air, it only gets worse and opens the way to further complications. You descend or you stay. Miotk descends, home without a summit. And again, without oxygen. The style stays stronger than the result. Since June 5, 2005, Miotk is the only Pole in history to have climbed Everest without supplementary oxygen. One man, one summit, one way. This record holds for almost 19 years. Over those years, dozens more Poles climb Everest. Clients of commercial expeditions, guides, experienced mountaineers, all of them with a bottle on their back. No one repeats what Miotk did in 2005. The change comes in May of 2024. The Polish climber Piotr Krzyżowski climbs Everest without supplementary oxygen. For the first time in 19 years, Miotk has a second man in this category. Not someone who took his primacy away. That stays his forever. Just a second Pole who has finally walked this path without a bottle. By this point, the book by the American journalist Michael Kodas has been on the shelves of international mountaineering libraries for 16 years. The story from the third camp at 8,300 meters is fixed in the literature. It's quoted in studies of the ethics of Himalayan climbing, in publications about the commercial Everest, in material about Sherpas and porters. Miotk's name is now known not only in Poland, but over all these years, not a single official investigation has ever been opened into the robbery itself at 8,300. Neither the Chinese side, through which he climbed, nor the Nepal Guides Association, nor any international mountaineering federation appoints a commission, hears witnesses, or looks for the ones who, in Miotk's account, carried gear out of the tents in the high camps in the spring of 2005. The names are never spoken, no one is removed from work, no one loses a license. The ones who, in Miotk's account, climbed up to the third camp while he was on his way to the summit and carefully unzipped his tent. No one in the mountains has ever identified them. By his account, those people go on working on the mountain just as before. Miot's story stays in the memory of mountaineering exactly as he himself wrote it down in the open letter of June 2005, the story of a man who was robbed at 8,300 meters, and who, against the expected ending, came back alive after all.